So this is the third part of my series of videos about this modification. I've been working on the monotribe for some years. Well, I haven't really been working on it for years. I started working on it 6 years ago. I breadboarded some stuff. I figured out some circuitry I wanted to use. I did some hand-drawn schematics. I posted a couple videos online, demonstrating some of the stuff I had learned, and some schematics too. And then it's a job, by the way. I don't own any monotribes. This is a job for a client. I do a lot of mods of synthesizers, and but in any case, I breadboarded the circuitry and everything 6 years ago, and then through a whole range of reasons, the job got delayed, partially from me and partially from the client. But eventually, after 6 years, came back and said, let's finish this up. So I had to design the boards for this earlier this year, and that's what I did. I took my hand-drawn schematics and I put them into a schematic program and designed the boards and stuff. And if you've watched the other videos, you've seen the boards out of the box, and part 2 is me assembling the unit. And so in this video, I want to actually demonstrate the features and go over them a little more carefully. So let's just look at the various things I've added first, and then I'll start playing some sounds out of it. So at the top of the box, let's see, top of the box, on the top board, you've got a volume section now. You've got a volume knob for VCO1, VCO2, the pulse width modulator, and the sub-oscillator. So all of those are volume knobs heading into the mixer. VCO1 didn't used to have its own volume knob, so I've added that on. It's an added feature. With the Korg, you could only adjust the volume of the rhythm or the level of the entire VCA previously. You've also got 3 sort of bonus features up here. One is this click pop suppression. I published a video about this 6 years ago and put the schematics online and stuff. So basically it's just what I had already published before. It's a click pop suppression circuitry that's added onto the VCA to get rid of clicks and pops. You have an off position, you have a low position, and you have a high position. Let's say low for a small amount of suppression and high for a very large amount, as described in the previous video. Now you've got a choice of controlling the VCA either from the envelope generator, which is what it always was, built in on the monotribe. But you can also use VCO2, the triangle wave of that, to control the VCA, and we'll demonstrate that later with some sound. And then over here you've got, you can now do drum accenting, which is a really kind of cool feature you can use for some effects on the rhythm section of the unit. So you can do accenting using the envelope generator, again, oscillator VCO2, the triangle wave. Now on the side, so over here, this is all drum stuff. That's why I've put the accent over there too. So everything around here is all modifications or additions to the rhythm section. You've got basically a switch and a pot for the bass drum, the snare noise, and the hi-hat separately. You've got, excuse me, you've got a pot to control the decay from full, actually kind of booming, a little beyond the stock monotribe. It booms beyond that all the way down to 0. So you can decay all the way out on all of those. You've got switches which allow you to, they're 3 position switches. If you have them in the forward position, that's the mix position. And in that position, those particular drums, each of those drums is being sent to the mixer inside the Korg, and also the mix out. I've got a separate mix out jack on the back. So if you turn down the volume knob here on rhythm, you'll still be getting the mix out here, so you can amp that separately or mix it separately somewhere else. The middle position is completely off. It removes it from the mix. And the final position that way is there's individual outputs at the back, output jacks at the back for bass drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. And so if you flip them this way, you're taking them out of the mix and sending them to that jack. You can do that live while you're playing, or you can set it up beforehand, so you can take the drums individually to another mixer or somewhere else. So that's the drum side. Okay, on the front side, you've got the VCO2 and the pulse width modulator. The pulse VCO2, you've got 2 tuning knobs for, define and a coarse. You've got control voltage in, which means that if you put that up and you tune this to VCO1, the built-in Korg oscillator, it'll be tracking over pretty close to 5 octaves. We're limited a bit by the rail-to-rail swing of the op amps, and since Korg is running on 5 volts, this is giving us basically 5 octaves of tracking, a little bit less, because you don't get exactly 0 to 5 volts out. You get 0.2 volts to 4.95 volts. So you lose 2 or 3 notes off of the 5 octave range. Korg normally does, if you control here, Korg is normally doing 6.5 octaves. That's because they're not using internally 1 volt per octave. They're using a much smaller level. So, but you can set that up to be tracking on the upper end or the lower end or right in between, whatever you want to do. But you don't really need 6.5 octaves of range anyway, tracking. So the tracking works quite well. You've also got frequency modulation in, so if you have that up, and you have this set to VCO and VCF or VCO, then the frequency modulation that's being sent to VCO1 will also go to VCO2. You've got LFO out range, which means normally the VCO2 is, I think it's running about 60 hertz to, it doesn't go quite as high as the Korg. It goes up to, I think the Korg goes to 21 or 2200 hertz, and this goes up to 15, maybe 1500 or something. So it's not quite getting all the way up, but high enough for most things. But if you throw it to LFO out, then the range is from a half a hertz to 30 hertz. So then you have another separately controllable LFO here, which again you can use up here to control the VCA or the drum accenting. You've also got a sync, so you can sync it to VCO1. If you do that, if you don't use the control voltage, but instead you use the sync, you can sync this VCO2 to the entire 6.5 octave range of the VCO1, and the sync is a kind of nice effect too. If you've played with other synthesizers, you know basically how the sync works. So, and then you've got your choice of wave out. There's just 2 for VCO2. There's a triangle wave and a square wave. This wave out switch also has an off position, so you can turn it off in the middle of playing. This wave out switch is only affecting the wave to the mixer. So it's only, if you turn this off here, it's shutting off the volume to the, to the volume knob here at the mixer. It's not affecting the other places on the device where you can use VCO2. It's only the actual output to the mixer. Let's see, you've got, now we got the pulse width modulation section. Here you can, for the choice of the source, you can use VCO1 or VCO2 as the source to the modulator. For the modulation input, you have your choice of using the envelope generator, or if you throw it on that side, you're using whichever VCO isn't selected here. So if you've got VCO1 selected here, and you've got this thrown over here, you're modulating it with VCO2, or vice versa. If you have that on 2, you're modulating it with 1, or like I said, the envelope generator, or the middle position is you've got the modulator turned off and you can just adjust manually the pulse width. Here's the intensity for the modulator, and this is the initial pulse width you can set all the way from one side all the way to the other. And then lastly, on this side, we got the sub-oscillator. Again, you've got your choice of which VCO is going to be the source. You can be 2 or 1. You've got your choice of phase. You can have it in phase with the input, or you can have it 180 degrees out of phase. and you've got your number of octaves down. So you've got -1 octave or -2 octave from the source. Now, here, we'll put that. Oh. Now at the back, let's see. The back, you've got 11 jacks added. Now you can see that I haven't. Eventually, I'm hoping to have a little piece of black felt that's across there, just like Korg uses here on the rocker switches. Is a little piece of black felt that's been, a hole created to, stop you from seeing inside. And I haven't been able to locate a source for that stuff yet, but at some point there'll be a piece of felt that's sitting there. So basically you don't see inside, it's only the jacks that are visible. But this is temporary. So the jacks, you've got MIDI in and out. The MIDI connector on the main board is being sent to the top board here, and there's an opto isolator and so forth. The circuitry is up on the top board, and you've got the jacks MIDI in and out here. You've got now 7 jacks for the rhythm section out. You've got the mix out, as I talked about before. You've got the separate outputs for the bass drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. And you've also got separate trigger outputs for the bass drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. So you can take the triggers from those, the actual signals that make the drum kick or the hi-hat kick, and you can send it to somewhere else and have it trigger another sequencer. And you've also got CV and gate out as well. Again, we're limited. The CV out is limited 0 to 5 volts, so it's just under a 5-volt octave range, and you can set where that range sits within the Korg, 6.5. You can have it starting from the very bottom or up at the very top, whatever. And then you've got the gate signal out. Now this is, as if you watch my other videos, you know that this is the first version 0.0, 1.0, whatever, the first version of the boards. And I mentioned in the previous videos that I had to see if there were going to be any errors in the boards. And there were some. Nothing major. The good thing is that one of the big things I worried about with these boards is if you look inside this right now, you see I'm using literally every square inch of space pretty much inside the monotribe. The only area I'm not using is there's a tiny little area over here and a tiny little area over here, but basically I've got an entire top board that's stretched around here and these side boards, and because of the way I designed it so that nothing was hardwired, all the boards can pop in and out, and you can run the machine with the boards out. It was a very intricate design to kind of figure out how to do all that. And the design of the boards, the size of them and everything was my biggest worry, and actually all of that worked out perfectly fine. They all fit perfectly and all that. There were a couple problems in the circuitry, and that is because I breadboarded this thing 6 years ago. I drew some schematics really quickly by hand, and then the whole project got shelved for 6 years, 5.5, whatever. And so then when I was copying my hand-drawn schematics to the computer, a couple areas were a little sketchy, and I sort of, rather than breadboarding it again, I sort of guessed at some things, and there were a couple of mistakes on the board. It required some minor surgery on a couple of the boards, cutting a couple traces and running some jumpers. Nothing major, but a couple things. So there will be a revision 1.1 of the boards, which I will be sending out to have done probably within the next 3 to 4 weeks, just when time allows. But I need to build 2 more of these for my client, and those will be the revision 1.1. And there are a couple other features, fairly minor, well, one kind of big feature but easy to implement, that will be in revision 1.1 when it's done. Nothing will change basically anywhere except on the top board. You'll notice, if you saw before when I had this plugged in, you notice that these switches are lit up. The switches have little LEDs built in, but we decided that it would be nice to have those those pulsing, like the tempo knob. So for example, here with the VCA, you would see the envelope generator, you would see VCA2 pulsing at the frequency which it would drive the VCA at. Same thing here. And over here, I'll probably, there's two possible LEDs in that switch. I might put a little driver in there so that you'll have a different color for low or high or off when it's in the middle position. So I'm going to change a little bit the driving of those LEDs. Right now, they're just on all the time. And then, so that's a minor change, but the one major thing that we forgot to add, or I forgot to add, is we want a little bit of control over the VCF. Right now with the monotribe, you only have the rate and intensity. You only have the LFO. You have one possibility for the VCF, and that's the LFO. And you only have one set of rate and intensity knobs. So even though internally Korg is putting out two different LFOs from the CPU to drive the VCF and the VCO, but because they only gave you one set of rate and intensity knobs, those LFOs are always running at exactly the same rate or intensity. So you're only selecting whether you're hearing one of them or two of them or both of them. And so you can only set one set here. But what we'd like is that, so I'm going to add one more switch up here that allows you to send the envelope generator to the VCF instead. So for example, you can send the envelope generator to the VCF, and you can drive the VCA from VCO2. And the other thing is, we're going to, there's actually nowhere to add new jacks. This is literally as many jacks as you can pack in at the top. There is no way to get more, because any spare space is filled with caps that are on the main board or blockages at either end. There's literally no way to put any more jacks. This is the maximum number. But what we'll probably do is we're going to double up one of these jacks. These are all mono jacks except for the MIDI in and out. And so what we'll probably do is double. We got 3 trigger outputs. What we'll probably do is double up one of those. So for example, we'll only devote two jacks to the trigger outs. So we'll free up one jack, basically. We want cutoff frequency in for the VCF, so you can drive that from another synthesizer using a 0 to 5 control voltage. It's an easy thing to implement. I should have done it already. But that little bit of changes for the VCF, and then the switches will be revision 1.1. Anyway, those are all the features. I'm going to go through them really quick with the sound hooked up so you can kind of hear what's happening.